This was the Republican Party. The party of Abraham Lincoln. The party that vowed to preserve the Union, built on an idea of free soil, free labor, free men. It was born from a moral crisis, forged in the fires of civil war to stand against slavery and for the unifying principles of the nation. And this is where it led. So how do you get from the profound ideals of the Gettysburg Address to the chaos and fury of January 6th? How does the Party of Lincoln become the party that laid siege to the very democratic institutions Lincoln fought to preserve? What if this wasn't an accident, but a destination? What if the seeds of this turmoil weren't sown in 2016, but over a century ago? This is the story of a political party's secret descent. It's a historical investigation into how calculated deals with extremism, paranoia, and conspiracy, all made for the sake of power, paved a direct path from the 1850s to today. This isn't a story of a sudden fall from grace. It's a slow, deliberate walk into chaos. The foundation and its first cracks. To understand the journey, you have to start at the beginning. The Republican Party was founded in the 1850s as a collection of different groups all united against the spread of slavery. But right from its birth, it faced a difficult choice, one that would haunt it for its entire history. To have a real shot at winning, it had to appeal to a wide range of voters. And that included a radical, anti-immigrant, and anti-Catholic movement known as the Know-Nothings. Officially called the American Party, they ran on a platform of pure paranoia, believing in a secret papal conspiracy to destroy American liberty. They led mob violence against Irish immigrants and burned Catholic churches. Privately, Abraham Lincoln was disgusted by their ideology. In a letter, he wrote that if the Know-Nothings ever took control, the Declaration of Independence would need a rewrite. All men are created equal, except Negroes, and foreigners, and Catholics. He said he'd rather move to a country like Russia, where you could get your despotism pure, and without the base alloy of hypocrisy. But publicly, Lincoln and the early Republican leadership walked a very fine line. They needed the votes of former Know-Nothings to win elections. So, while Lincoln hated their nativist views, he couldn't afford to push them away completely. The Know-Nothings mostly folded into the Republican Party after 1856, giving him the critical support that helped them rise to power. This was the first of many compromises. The party's founding ideal of liberty was immediately put in conflict with a pragmatic choice to absorb a faction fueled by paranoia and bigotry. It was a dark seed, planted in a corner of the new coalition. After the Civil War and Reconstruction, that moral fire that started the party began to fade, and this tension only grew. The party of big, nation-building ideas, the transcontinental railroad, land-grant colleges, slowly began to change. By the turn of the 20th century, the party became known as the party of big business, monopolies, and the status quo. This shift left a void, a space where grievances could grow, and it set the stage for the first major political earthquake of the 20th century. The Red Scare and the rise of conspiracy. The first half of the 20th century was shaped by economic collapse and world wars, but it was the Cold War that gave the paranoia simmering on the party's fringes the perfect place to grow. In the late 1940s, a junior Republican senator from Wisconsin was facing a tough re-election campaign and needed a big issue to save his career. His name was Joseph McCarthy. On February 9, 1950, speaking to a Republican women's club in Wheeling, West Virginia, McCarthy made a shocking, completely unsubstantiated claim. He held up a piece of paper and declared he had a list of known communists still working and shaping policy in the State Department. The number he gave kept changing. In some contexts, he'd mentioned 205, but in the famous Wheeling speech, the number was 57. In the end, the exact number didn't matter. The accusation itself, delivered with terrifying rhetoric about a final battle between communistic atheism and Christianity, was like a bolt of lightning. McCarthy became a national sensation overnight. He had found a powerful political formula. Fear-mongering and baseless accusations could be a hell of a weapon. The term McCarthyism was born, defined by public attacks on the character and patriotism of political rivals. McCarthy and his allies used accusations of communism, disloyalty, and even sex crimes during the so-called Lavender Scare to attack anyone they saw as an enemy. His tactics got so vicious that a fellow Republican, Senator Margaret Chase Smith, issued a declaration of conscience, saying the Senate had been debased to the level of a forum for hate and character assassination. Still, the party leadership, seeing how he energized the base and hurt the Democrats, mostly let him run wild. When Republicans took back Congress and the White House in 1953, McCarthy was even rewarded. He became chairman of a powerful committee, which he then used to continue his crusade, this time against his own party's administration. It was only when he took on the US Army in televised hearings that the whole country saw his bullying tactics up close. The famous line from Army Counsel Joseph Welch, "Have you no sense of decency, sir?" finally broke the spell, and the Senate censured him. But a lesson had been learned. The Republican Party had seen firsthand how stoking fear, even with zero evidence, could create a powerful political movement. McCarthy had written a playbook, and others were waiting to use it. The extremist alliance and the Southern strategy. If McCarthy made baseless accusations mainstream, the John Birch Society turned organized conspiracy into an art form. Founded in 1958 by a candy magnate named Robert Welch, the JBS was built on truly next-level paranoia. Welch believed that President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a five-star general and Republican hero, was a dedicated, conscious agent of the communist conspiracy. He claimed that fluoridating water was a communist plot to poison Americans and that the entire civil rights movement was a communist front. The Birchers were, by any definition, a fringe extremist group. And yet, their influence grew fast, with a peak membership estimated between 60,000 and 80,000 people, organized in secret cells. More importantly, they became a powerful force inside the Republican Party, especially in Sunbelt states like California. They were a key part of the movement that got Barry Goldwater the 1964 presidential nomination. Though mainstream conservatives like William F. Buckley Jr. tried to push the Birchers out, Goldwater refused to condemn them. It was a crucial moment. Once again, the party chose to absorb the energy of an extremist group rather than reject it. As historian Matthew Dalek points out, Republican leaders figured they could use the Birchers' passion without letting their paranoia take over the party. It was a profound miscalculation. This embrace of the fringe happened at the same time as the biggest political realignment in modern American history. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 were huge moral victories for the country, but they shattered the Democratic Party's control over the solid South. President Lyndon B. Johnson famously told an aide after signing the '64 Act that the Democrats had lost the South for a generation. Republican strategists saw their opening. Guys like Kevin Phillips, a young analyst who wrote The Emerging Republican Majority, argued the GOP could build a lasting political dynasty by appealing to white Southern voters who felt left behind by the Democrats' stand on civil rights. This became known as the Southern Strategy. It was a cold and calculated plan. As Nixon's chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, wrote in his diary, Nixon emphasized that you have to face the fact that the whole problem is really the blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognized this while not appearing to. So instead of using overtly racist language, the strategy used dog whistles and coded phrases. Politicians started talking about law and order, states' rights, and forced busing to tap into white racial anxiety without having to say the quiet part out loud. The most infamous explanation of the strategy came years later, from Republican strategist Lee Atwater in a 1981 interview. He laid it all out. You start out in 1954 by saying, nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say, nigger, that hurts you. Backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. He went on to say that eventually you get so abstract you're just talking about cutting taxes, and the byproduct is that black people get hurt worse than whites. The Southern strategy worked. It flipped the South from blue to red, but at a terrible cost. The party had now explicitly tied its future to stoking racial resentment, cementing its alliance with the forces of reaction. The New Right and the rise of partisan warfare, the 1980s and the Reagan Revolution saw all these trends come together. This wasn't just about economics. It was a mashup of big business interests and a new, highly organized, and very angry social conservatism. Figures like Paul Weyrich, who helped create the Heritage Foundation and gave the Moral Majority its name, were the architects of this movement. Weyrich called himself a radical, trying to overturn the present power structure. He understood that old-school Republican talking points about the free market didn't work in working-class neighborhoods. He argued, the New Right is looking for issues that people care about, and social issues fit the bill. Yes, they're emotional issues, but that's better than talking about capital formation. This new coalition was built on a powerful cocktail of cultural grievances, campaigning against abortion, the Equal Rights Amendment, and LGBTQ rights. Ronald Reagan, who one historian called an amiable vessel for a message of fear, gave this movement a friendly face while, like Goldwater before him, refusing to reject extremist groups like the John Birch Society. The New Right merged with the religious right, turning conservative Christians into a massive voting bloc. This alliance cemented the party's new identity, a vehicle for cultural warfare, framing politics not as a debate over policy, but as a moral crusade for the soul of America. In the 1990s, that crusade became much more aggressive and personal, led by a backbench Georgia congressman named Newt Gingrich. Gingrich saw politics as war, and believed the path to a Republican majority was to tear down the institution of Congress from the inside. He pioneered a new kind of smash-mouth politics, giving these fiery speeches on C-SPAN to an empty chamber, designed purely to be turned into media soundbites. He figured out that the angrier and more shocking he was, the more attention he got. As head of a political action committee called GOPAC, Gingrich basically trained a new generation of Republicans to speak like Newt. In a 1990 memo called Language, a Key Mechanism of Control, he told candidates exactly which words to use. Republicans should describe themselves with words like freedom, principled, and common sense, while branding Democrats with words like sick, traitors, corrupt, and radical. This wasn't just about winning an argument. It was a playbook designed to paint opponents as less than human and frame policy disagreements as a battle between good and evil. As historian Julian Zelizer notes, Gingrich taught Republicans that partisanship was more important than anything else, more important than governing, and more important than the health of democracy itself. This scorched earth approach worked, leading to the Republican Revolution of 1994, but it also poisoned American politics, creating the combative, tribal, angry attitude that would define the decades to come. The Tea Party and the culmination in chaos, the foundation built by McCarthy, the Southern strategy, and Newt Gingrich's partisan warfare found its next big expression in the late 2000s with the rise of the Tea Party. At first, the movement seemed like a grassroots protest against government spending and the new president, Barack Obama. But it very quickly became a vessel for the same currents of paranoia and resentment that had been flowing through the party for decades. The face of this new anger was often Sarah Palin, the 2008 vice presidential nominee. At the first National Tea Party convention, she declared that America was ready for another revolution, mocking Obama's message of hope and change. While her speech was tamer than others at the event, it gave a mainstream voice to a movement where people were carrying signs calling the president a Marxist and openly fearing a coming dictatorship. This wasn't just about taxes. The Tea Party era was also the era of birtherism, the totally baseless conspiracy theory, pushed heavily by a certain Donald Trump, that President Obama wasn't born in the United States. It was a direct callback to the nativist and racially charged politics of the past, now supercharged by right-wing media and the internet. And the Republican establishment, far from condemning this, saw the energy of the Tea Party and rushed to embrace it. They saw a path back to power, and once again, the price of admission was a full-throated tolerance of extremism. Palin warned the movement against being defined by any charismatic guy with a teleprompter, a clear jab at Obama. But in doing so, she was validating a leaderless, rage-fueled populism that the party would soon find it couldn't control. This long descent, this 70-year history of making deals with extremists and weaponizing paranoia, leads directly to Donald Trump and January 6th. As journalist David Korn argues, Trump wasn't an aberration, he was the inevitable result of this strategy. He just took the subtext and made it text. The dog whistles became bullhorns. The coded language of the Southern strategy was replaced with direct attacks. The conspiracy theories of the John Birch Society, once kept on the fringes, became central campaign themes, from birtherism to the claim that the 2020 election was stolen. The Republican Party had spent decades mixing a cocktail of fear, tribalism, and anger to win elections. It told its voters not to trust institutions, that their political opponents were evil traitors, and that a shadowy, deep state was plotting against them. When the moment came on January 6, 2021, a part of that base simply believed what they had been told for generations. The attack on the Capitol was the logical conclusion for a party that had systematically undermined faith in democracy itself, all for political gain. And the attempt by many in the party to rewrite the history of that day, to call it a normal tourist visit, or to shift the blame, is just the final, predictable step in this descent. From the uneasy deal with the know-nothings in the 1850s to McCarthy's red baiting, from the cynical math of the Southern strategy to the verbal warfare of Newt Gingrich, from the Tea Party's anti-establishment rage to the violence of January 6th, the path is terrifyingly clear. This wasn't a sudden wrong turn. It was a decades-long series of strategic choices to court, cultivate, and weaponize the darkest forces in American politics, all in the name of power. Every step down was a choice. A choice to put winning ahead of principle. A choice to harness anger instead of building unity. A choice to embrace paranoia over truth. The party of Lincoln, founded to preserve the Union, slowly became a force that threatened to tear it apart from within. The history is there. The connections are clear. The question is what happens next. Can a political party that has gone this far down this particular road ever find its way back? And what does it mean for the health of our democracy when one of its two major parties has such a long and cozy relationship with extremism? What do you think? Is this a permanent change, or can the party of Lincoln find its way back to its roots? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this story helped connect some dots for you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the forces that shape our world. Thanks for watching.